one, two, three, four, five, six, 7 of the 9 page 1 Google searches for best Zelda games include Ocarina of Time in the top 5, and it's just fucking wrong. Sure, Ocarina of Time is a good game, but hear me out, it's a horrible, horrible masterpiece. Just to make it clear, I am talking about this game without Breath of the Wild in mind. I think Breath of the Wild is such a far outlier, it really shouldn't be compared to older games. I know that a lot of people are going to be mad about me talking about Ocarina of Time in a negative light, so I do want to mention that I don't hate Ocarina of Time. I never have, and I never will, and so I just want to put that down there before you all start getting all... And I do want to just talk about what Ocarina of Time did right versus what Ocarina of Time did wrong, and how other Zelda games did those wrong things in the right way. Let's start with music. Ocarina of Time opens the game with a mystical and evil soundtrack to portray your next 10 hours of gameplay or so. And it portrays that you're going to be met with evils that Link has never faced before, and that us, the players, have yet to experience in a Zelda game thus far. It's eerie, accompanied by false strings and deep horns, and these all come together to give us a sense of dread. Something truly awful is about to happen to Link. Alternatively, let's take a look at the opening cutscene from Twilight Princess. Gentle horns and percussion bring a sense of security, a much more clean tone than that in the beginning of Ocarina of Time. Now, you could argue that this is because it's an entirely different story, and you'd be right, of course. The point isn't the story so much, it's how the story is portrayed. In Twilight Princess, you opened a happy village, and then as the game progresses, the bad event happens, and then you're thrown into being the hero of Twilight. In Ocarina of Time, it does this thing where it has to lay out the entire first branch of the story for you, because it's a 3D game making the same mistakes that 2D games made. When I think of Twilight Princess, I think of vivid colors, a beautifully written story, and just saturated landscapes in deep greens, yellows, and oranges. But even with Ocarina of Time 3D, everything felt flat. Flat colors, flat shading, and a flat story. So what exactly is the story of Ocarina of Time? It's much more straightforward than even some of the Zelda games before it. So a very basic plot of the first Zelda game is you're a kid, you find an old guy in a cave, you go around and collect triangles, and then you kill a pig guy to save the princess. In Ocarina of Time, you're a kid, you're told by a tree that you're actually a Hylian and not a Korok. You go inside of him, kill a spider, kill the tree, throw the forest into chaos, befriend the princess, get some stones, get a sword, get told by some old guy in the middle of time and space that you're the chosen one. Yeah, you gather some chunks of metal, and then you kill a pig guy to save the princess. That's the base storyline that most Zelda games followed up until the year of 1993. In Link's Awakening DX, and Link's Awakening 19, the music of The Legend of Zelda is at its best. Chiptune tunes that just dig themselves deep into your head and bury them there for hours. Link's Awakening is a gripping story about Link, who was knocked out while aboard his raft while at sea and ended up getting shored up on Koholint Island, which, like Majora's Mask's Termina, is very familiar but very foreign at the same time. The player has never seen these people before, but we feel so enthralled in this location, like we've been there 100 times. We feel welcomed. Once we start getting the idea that maybe the world that we're involved in might not be real, we become worried. The story is entirely in Link's dream. The game ends whenever you wake up the dream fish. The fish wakes up and you defeat the final nightmare. And then the game is over, the dream is over, and you have to wake up. Compare this, and a thrilling story with a fantastic plot twist, especially for a children's game, to Ocarina of Time. A tale as old as the Song of Time itself, a coming-of-age story just to save the princess. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that Link's Awakening is underrated by any means. It's not. I'm simply saying that Ocarina of Time has a very weak story for being the best Zelda game in so many people's eyes. For my third section of this video, and quite possibly my biggest gripe with Ocarina of Time, let's talk about temples. I get it. Some of you may be thinking that all I'm doing is comparing Ocarina of Time to these other Zelda games, which I am, but I'm doing it out of love. I love the Zelda series, and that's why I feel the need to make this video, because you all want to keep buying these. Well, I'm wearing these. No, I'm wearing these. The temples in Ocarina of Time suck. They do. They're awful, and I hate them. The Shadow Temple is fun, but the rest of them just kind of feel like I'm dragging my feet for 40 minutes at a time. I don't care. The temples are not fun, interesting, or entertaining. It doesn't help that I've played this game to death, so every time that I play Ocarina of Time, it's the same thing. Enter dungeon, climb this, open this, fight this, get item, use item, get new part of dungeon, access the boss room, and fight the boss. Every single Zelda game has this structure in its dungeons, and it's old. This is why Breath of the Wild changed things, even if it's not exactly how people wanted it. You can only put a slingshot or a bow or a boomerang in a dungeon in so many different ways. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to tell you that the games before Ocarina of Time had good dungeons, because you know what those dungeons made me do? You want good dungeons, good mechanics? Play A Link Between Worlds. You have 3D puzzles. You have funny wall time. You got item borrowing. You want a good console Zelda with good dungeons? Go play Twilight Princess or Wind Waker or Majora's Mask or Sky. What I'm saying is all of them have better dungeons than Ocarina of Time, except Breath of the Wild, but remember, I'm not really comparing that one. You may not agree about Ocarina of Time not having the best dungeons. Water Temple is a very large expanse and a swirling puzzle. Shadow Temple has a very creepy vibe, especially for a Nintendo 64 game. Spirit Temple's music is ethereal and breathes the same way that a religious sermon does. But in every instance, I can think of a temple that does it better in another Zelda game. For instance, Twilight Princess's Twilight Palace is literally just 2 linear puzzles, and yet it made me more frightened than the Shadow Temple did, and it's where 7-year-old koijesus had to start playing. And then there's the Skyward Sword dungeon with its very obvious religious background where Link travels between heaven and hell. The music fits just perfectly, and the Great Bay Temple and Stone Tower Temple from Majora's Mask. Both of these just crush the Water Temple from Ocarina of Time by being massive puzzles in and of themselves. The Great Bay Temple has a central room where you have to fan out into all these different separate areas, and then the Stone Tower Temple literally requires you to flip the entire dungeon on its head. I won't even get into how the main core mechanics of Zelda games have done nothing but improve since Ocarina of Time, since that should be obvious. Fun fact, as games get newer, there are going to be better and more intuitive ways to achieve things like aiming, Z-targeting, sailing, parasailing, sword fighting, items, and everything in between. And real quick, while we're still on the temple section of this video, I do want to give a quick shout out to one of my favorite series on YouTube. The YouTube channel Game Maker's Toolkit, which great channel, love their stuff, has a series called Boss Keys. And the first season of Boss Keys actually walks you through the different layouts and how the actual temples in Zelda games are designed and how they work. So now that we're at the end of the video and you've listened to me rant about Ocarina of Time for 10 minutes, I just want to explain that I think that Ocarina of Time is a masterpiece, but it's a horrible masterpiece. The Zelda games needed Ocarina of Time in order to become what they are today, but I don't think that Ocarina of Time is a milestone anymore. It was needed whenever 3D games were new, maybe even up until Twilight Princess. 10 years is short whenever it comes to innovation, after all. There are a lot of games out there, and Ocarina of Time is just one of them. Feel free to have it as your favorite Zelda game, or even your favorite game of all time, but I hope that my points made sense at least. Ocarina of Time's music is decent. The story was great for the time, and the mechanics and dungeons were innovative for the time. Ocarina of Time is a very good game, a great one at that, but if you're wanting to go back and play it now, after watching this video, I just have one recommendation. Play Ocarina of Time 3D. It's just better.